Year 1513. Humanity was still far from fully understanding the boundaries of the planet it lived on. The oceans were filled with unknowns, and maps were full of legendary sea monsters and fictitious continents. However, one of the powerful admirals of the Ottoman Empire was drawing such a world on a piece of gazelle skin parchment that this drawing would, centuries later, astonish even modern science and fundamentally shake everything we know about human history. This map remained in darkness for centuries, until the year 1929. While efforts were underway to convert Topkapi Palace into a museum following the establishment of the Republic of Turkey, a parchment was accidentally found deep within forgotten archives among dusty shelves. What was found was the only surviving piece of the legendary world map of the famous Ottoman admiral Piri Reis. At first glance, this was a highly detailed and magnificent map for its time. However, experts examining the map, when following the coasts of South America further down south, encountered a chilling detail. At the very bottom of the map, a massive landmass that no human had set foot on until then, and whose existence was not even known, was drawn in full detail: Antarctica. At this point, we need to pause and look at history. According to official historical records and the scientific world, the continent of Antarctica was first seen and discovered by Russian explorers in 1820. But how did Piri Reis manage to draw this vast ice desert on his map so perfectly 300 years before the continent was officially discovered? Moreover, this was only a small part of the mystery. The Antarctic coasts on the map were not covered with ice. Valleys, rivers, mountain ranges, and jagged coastlines were depicted as a completely ice-free, lush green continent with incredible topographical accuracy. We cannot solve this mystery without understanding the genius behind this impossible map. Muhyiddin Piri Bey, also known as Piri Reis. He was not just a sword-wielding soldier, he was a tremendous scientist, proficient in astronomy, mathematics, and geography. In his unique work called Kitab-ı Bahriye, he described every bay, every harbor, and every wind of the Mediterranean almost like a poem. Piri Reis was not an ordinary dreamer. He was a rationalist who drew what he saw and knew. Indeed, the notes he wrote in his own handwriting on the edges of this controversial map contained the first codes that unlocked the doors to this enormous mystery. In his own words, he said, "While creating this map, I benefited from about 20 old maps and the Mappa Mundi, maps drawn during the time of Alexander the Great, and maps of newly discovered places by the Arabs and the Portuguese. I combined all of these on one scale to produce this map." Piri Reis's honest confession pushed researchers into an even deeper darkness. If Piri Reis obtained this information from ancient maps, then who drew those ancient maps? The answer to this question became much more terrifying with the involvement of modern science. Let's focus on the region of Antarctica known as Queen Maud Land. On Piri Reis's map, the coastline of this very region was drawn in an extremely clear manner, showing it without ice. In 1949, a large expedition team consisting of Swedish, British, and Norwegian scientists undertook a mission to this challenging part of Antarctica. Their goal was to map the shape of the actual landmass beneath the thick ice layer using seismic radars and advanced sound waves. After months of arduous work, the topographic map produced by the seismic radars was placed side by side with the map Piri Reis drew on gazelle skin in 1513. The result was literally shocking. The curves, mountains, and riverbeds detected by the seismic devices beneath kilometers of thick ice matched Piri Reis's drawings down to the millimeter. This was where modern science hit a dead end, and the limits of logic were surpassed. Because there was a fact that geologists and glaciologists had established with definitive evidence. The Queen Maud Land region had been covered by massive, impenetrable ice masses for at least 6,000 years, which is much longer than the known written civilizations in human history. If these lands have been under ice for the last 6,000 years, and Piri Reis obtained this information from ancient sources dating back thousands of years, then who was the original source of this map? Was there someone before the Ice Age who could see our planet from the air, calculate longitude and latitude flawlessly, and map the entire world? These enormous questions inevitably lead us to two major theories. The first theory is the advanced ancient civilizations theory, which official history never wants to accept, but the evidence constantly pushes us in that direction. Perhaps before the Ice Age, there was a highly advanced civilization, similar to the Atlantis described in legends, capable of global-scale navigation, using mathematics and astronomy at or even beyond today's level. They mapped the planet. However, a tremendous global catastrophe, perhaps a great flood, or perhaps a sudden ice age, wiped this civilization off the face of the earth. All that remained of them were parchments that circulated from hand to hand, copied over and over, blending into myths. They were the ones who saw and drew Antarctica in its ice-free green state. The second major theory takes us to the flames of the Library of Alexandria. The phrase, "maps dating back to the era of Alexander the Great," mentioned in Piri Reis's notes, is a critical clue. The Library of Alexandria, the greatest knowledge center of the ancient world, housed not only books on philosophy and mathematics, but also secret geographical records of ancient sailors who traveled the world. The tragic burning and destruction of this library erased thousands of years of accumulated knowledge from humanity's memory. However, perhaps before the library burned, some copies of those ancient maps were smuggled out and passed down from generation to generation through secret sects, the Knights Templar, ancient pirates, or Byzantine scholars. These priceless resources fell into the hands of the Ottoman Empire, which ruled the oceans centuries later, and inspired the masterpiece of Piri Reis, who combined those pieces with his genius. This gazelle skin parchment, still preserved today in a special climate-controlled room in Topkapi Palace, continues to keep its silence. But what it tells us is very clear. Human history is much more complex, much darker, and much more magnificent than the flat and simple line taught to us in schools. The Piri Reis map is not just an Ottoman relic. It is a cipher waiting to be deciphered, belonging to the early periods of human history that have remained in darkness. So, what do you think is the real truth behind this impossible map? Who drew those original maps that Piri Reis combined? Was there an advanced ancient civilization watching the world from the sky, walking on the lush Antarctica before the glaciers? Or is there a completely different human history, turned to ashes in the Library of Alexandria and hidden from us by elites for centuries? What do you think about this mystery? Be sure to share your thoughts and theories with us in the comments.